Thank you. I'd like to welcome everybody to tonight's program. This is the Dr. Diane Murphy Leaders for Life program. Dr. Murphy was a former student athlete. I think many of you were here in the fall when we had one of these programs with the OVC Commissioner Beth DeBush. The Leaders for Life program is something that Dr. Murphy put together for our student athletes, our female student athletes, to hear speakers and hear presentations and help them with some things about leadership and life, thus Leaders for Life. She's a former student athlete here, as I mentioned, and she's now risen to become one of the most powerful women in college athletics in America. She's the athletic director right now at Columbia University in New York, was at Denver, in Denver, of course, and she was one of the speakers that came back and talked to our group a couple of years ago. We've had a lot of different programs, and it's been, I believe, very enlightening for all of you sitting out there for these programs. Tonight we're going in a little bit different direction. Instead of having someone who has been in the field for a long time and has worlds of wisdom to call upon, we have two young ladies. They're 29 and 28 years old. 28 and 27 years old. Boy, I have to be kicked for adding years. 28, 27. In other words, they're just a few years beyond where you guys are right now, especially you seniors. And they are where you will be in just a few short years. And we're going to hear from them, and I'll tell you a little bit more about them in a minute. But the first thing we want to do tonight is I'm going to call on a volunteer. Anybody want to volunteer? Catherine, come on down, please. Catherine Barker, please. Member of our women's basketball team. And I'll tell you more about Kristen, who is one of our speakers tonight. But one of the things Kristen does in her job, she works in public affairs for the United States Army at Fort Knox. And one of the things that Kristen does is training with soldiers on how to conduct television interviews when they are being interviewed for television, what they can say, what they can't say, and then she critiques them and helps them through. So right now, you don't have to be in the Army, but you are now going to be interviewed for television, Catherine, by Kristen. So let me turn it over to Kristen.
Hi, nice to meet you. My name is Kristen.
Nice to meet you.
And what is your hometown?
Sequatchie County, Tennessee.
Okay, so what's the TV station from there?
WBR Channel 12.
Okay, so pretend like I am interviewer Susie Q from WBR Channel 12, and I know nothing about you. We're going to do a little bit of a hometown interview. I'm just going to talk to you and you be you. Okay? All right, so tell me your name.
Catherine Barker.
Okay, and now I hear that you play some sort of sport up at a university. What do you do?
I play women's basketball at Tennessee Tech University.
Okay, and that's in, where is Tennessee?
Cookville, Tennessee.
Okay, so do you enjoy playing basketball?
I do.
Okay. How long have you played basketball?
Ever since the second grade.
Second grade. Okay, so did you grow up all the way in Sequatchie County and go to school?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So what's your favorite part about playing basketball at Tennessee Tech University?
Probably just the opportunity to play there. My teammates, they're awesome. We're like one big family, and then also I get my education paid for, so that's nice. And get to play for a top-notch program. Yes.
Now, I also hear that you have a little bit of family history with Tennessee. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yes, ma'am. My mom played here back in the 80s and won an OVC championship. And my Aunt Rebecca played here. She played basketball as well. And then my uncle played football here.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So did that weigh pretty heavily on your decision to come here?
It did,
Okay,
yeah.
Great. So do you have any interesting stories about any of your teammates that you'd like to share?
Not really. No.
Let's cut this off right now. Okay, have a seat. Okay, thank you, Kristen. Good answers. I wanted to put the spotlight on someone up there for just a moment. Let me introduce our two speakers, but first of all, what I want to say is, how many of you are going to graduate in a week and a half? Show of hands. Okay, we've got it. Not many of you are going to be leaving here soon, but how many of you are going to graduate at some point? Show of hands. I better see everybody's hand up. All right. How many of you know exactly where you're going once you leave college? I know Brooke does. A couple of you know exactly the job you're going to take, who you're going to marry in a couple of weeks, where it's going to be, wedding plans, color of the cake. Most of you really have. How many of you have no idea what you're going to do for a career? Raise your hand if you really have no idea. Okay? Really? How many of you think there's a possibility of what you're thinking of doing now might change? Never know. Their hands are all broken. They can't. Nobody can read them. The two young ladies that are going to talk to you tonight, throughout high school and into college, they had no idea what they were going to do. They had some ideas. They thought they might like this or they might like that. But after they got out of college, things completely changed for them, and they went off in totally different directions that they never dreamed they'd go into. Into law, we have Natalie, who is Assistant District Attorney General and got a law degree, and Kristen, who went into public affairs and got a job with the United States Army for public affairs. And they'll tell you a little bit about how they got those positions and what they do in those positions. The point of all this tonight is for them to talk about leadership and paths. There are thousands of paths that you guys will be taking when you leave here, and I guarantee a lot of those paths never crossed your mind yet and won't for years. And then all of a sudden an opportunity or a direction will present itself, and you'll take that, and the next thing you'll know, we'll invite you back here to speak to the group. So we'll see how that goes. I do want to introduce our speakers, and then I'll have them each have a few minutes. First of all, Kristen Marquez grew up here in Cookeville, Tennessee, went to Cookeville High. She'll tell you about that. But she is now the Public Affairs Officer for the U.S. Army at the Ireland Community Army Hospital at Fort Knox, Kentucky. And no, she doesn't have anything to do with the gold up there, although she wishes she did. And she has pretty much traveled a lot across Europe in her position, and she covers public affairs for the Army for 6 states. Natalie Ivy grew up also here in Cookeville, but also in Sevierville and in Fort Worth. She was back and forth, but spent a lot of time growing up in Cookeville. She also, both of them went to Cookeville High School. Then Natalie went out of the blue, went to University of Tennessee Law School and got her law degree, and now is the Assistant District Attorney General for the 7-county area, and they'll both talk about that. So I'm going to turn it over to them because you didn't come to hear me, you came to hear them. So please let me introduce first Kristen Marquez. Kristen?
All right.
Sorry.
All right, that's okay. Good evening, everyone. Thanks very much for inviting me to come out here and speak. It's really nice to see all these faces out here. As he said, growing up here in Cookeville, I really didn't know anything about the Army. I mean, I knew that Fort Campbell was kind of nearby. I don't even know if you know this. Fort Campbell's a couple hours away from us. Every once in a while, I'd see a helicopter fly over and think, oh, that's cool. But graduating high school, I came to Tech for a year, and then I did transfer away. I'm not going to tell you where I actually graduated from, because you probably hate me. But it was another OVC school that has red and the colors, and it's in Clarksville, Tennessee. But please don't hold that against me, because I normally don't claim that. But it was a good place for me to go. I started out going there thinking that I wanted to go into broadcast journalism. And once I got there, I took like 2 days of broadcasting and realized I really hate being in front of the camera. I really hate public speaking. I don't want to do this at all. I don't want to have anything to do with the public. Nothing. Even as when I was a kid growing up, I didn't give a speech until I was in the 6th grade for the very first time, because I used to cry and hide in the closet and hyperventilate, and all my teachers felt so sorry for me that they would just say, it's okay, you don't have to do it, and I would never have to do it. So here I am today, somehow a public affairs officer for the Army, and I am pretty much, my commander and myself are the bases of our command. I work for a brigade level command. I'm not going to go into what all that means. Actually, let me ask, how many of you actually know someone in the military right now? Quite a few of you. Wow, a lot. That's really great. That's really, really great. So I don't know, that probably doesn't mean that you necessarily understand all of it, but it's a pretty good size, brigade level, pretty good size. Like you said, we've got 6-state region that my command covers. So I'm pretty much kind of the face of what we do at Ireland Army Community Hospital and Fort Knox MedAct, which is medical department activity. I will try to stay away from too many Army acronyms for you. But basically what happened with me is, like I said, when I was at Austin P, I ended up switching from broadcast journalism. I kind of did stay in the same thing. I went over to mass communications. I felt like it was a little bit more broad. I could do kind of public relations and maybe stay a little bit more behind the camera. Got my degree there and really had no clue what I was going to do after that. There's really not a lot of opportunities in Clarksville. Didn't really want to come back to Cookeville as much as I loved growing up here. Again, there wasn't a lot for me here. And I happened to be reading through the Fort Campbell newspaper one day, and I saw a little ad in the back in the classified section for a reporter for the Fort Campbell Courier. I thought, well, let let me try. Let me just get my resume together. And I got my resume together, and they called me for an interview. And I had a terrible interview. I'm not gonna lie, it was awful. The girl even told me later that she said a lot of people wouldn't hire you based on that interview, but she hired me. And I started working there. From working there as a contractor, which meant that I was not even a government employee, not working for the military. I worked for a civilian newspaper that owned this newspaper. I worked there for about 6 months before I got picked up for a government position at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. So packed everything up and headed out to Oklahoma. Kind of didn't really like that job too, for a lot of different reasons. So I went a little bit more toward, I moved into Oklahoma City and started working for a civilian agency up there for a little while. After that, probably about 6 months after that, I got an email from someone at the Pentagon. And I don't know if you ever got an email from the Pentagon, but you kind of listen when that one pops into your inbox. You don't want to ignore that one. And it said, we really want you for this internship program, this training internship program for public affairs. Will you send us, your resume and things like that? So they had known who I was from my time at Fort Campbell and Fort Sill. That was probably the best thing that I ever did, was get that email, and I overnighted my resume, and I got it there on time. The next job interview I did was this crazy phone interview with 6 people from the Pentagon that was absolutely terrifying. But somehow, I guess I did okay, and they hired me for this internship program. After that, you sign this mobility agreement, and I'm not in the Army. I think he said that. I'm a civilian for the Army, but I still definitely get to move around a lot. And I didn't have any choice. They called me and said, hey, we're going to send you to Fort Jackson, South Carolina for a year of training. So loaded up the Penske truck and drove on out to South Carolina and lived there for about a year. Then I went to the actual Department of Public Affairs schools at Fort Meade, Maryland. So I went there for 2 months, went through the Joint Services training there, and then I did a 3-month rotation inside the Pentagon, which was amazing, especially as an intern, because I got to have all of the cool things that I got to do and really work with some amazing people, but none of the responsibility, because I was just an intern. So after that, when you finish the internship program, you are guaranteed a position within the government again. My next duty station was Heidelberg, Germany. So for the past 3 years, I've been living in Germany, doing the same thing, public affairs for the Army, and absolutely loving it. And it's been incredible travel opportunities and just the growth opportunities that I got out of that, with going to conferences in Berlin and working with the German soldiers and the soldiers from the Netherlands and things like that. Absolutely amazing. Now last summer I did take this job at Fort Knox, so I moved back here, and now I'm at Fort Knox. A little bit smaller level. It is a promotion, it's a better job for me, but it's not as exciting to be at Fort Knox as it was in Heidelberg. I won't lie about that. But one of the things I really would like to get across to you, let me say, my commander told me I'm not allowed to speak here unless I ask you to join the Army. So I'm going to go ahead and get that out of the way, because when he watches the video, sir, I told him to join the Army. Now, you can work for the government as a civilian, which is, like I said, what I do. And there are some amazing opportunities. Now, pretty much any major that you're in, the government has some sort of job that you can do. From, like I work at the hospital right now. We have lots of civilian doctors and nurses that work for the Army, but they're civilians, so we can deploy if we want. We don't have to. We can stay in one position. We can move around if we want. Really good opportunities. But even just like accounting and law, things like that, all sorts of opportunities with the government. But of course, I always have to push the military as well. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, how I got to where I am today. And basically, as he was saying, what I do now is work with our soldiers in our brigade on media training and media relations. I write a lot of articles for the newspaper. Anything that comes out of our command, I pretty much write. Or I am kind of the liaison if we have a reporter who wants to talk to someone about one of our soldiers or about something that we are taking part in. I set that up. I help those soldiers go through that interview. Things like that. So it's basically, it's public relations. I know there's probably somebody in here who's majoring in marketing, public relations, things like that. It's pretty much the exact same thing. It's just that I have to work with a lot more acronyms, and I work with people in uniform all the time, rather than business suits all the time. So, yeah, I guess that's basically a little bit on my background.
All right, and we'll have questions a little bit, and I've got some questions. Right now, let's bring up Natalie Ivy. Natalie's parents are both Tennessee Tech graduates. She's one of 4 members of her family. All 4 of them are Tennessee Tech graduates. Her husband is a Tennessee Tech graduate, so they have purple and gold blood. Natalie Ivy.
lot of time growing up, and one reason that Chris and I are good friends is because I like to talk a lot and she doesn't. So it works out really well. You know, she's a good listener and I like to talk. But I am a tech graduate. I graduated in 2007. It's not too long ago. I was a history major. I graduated from Cookville High School and picked history mainly because it was a class that I didn't do really poorly in, if that makes sense. It was like I could kind of do it. And I thought, well, this is interesting and this is what I'll pick. Probably not the best professional advice I would give somebody, but it worked. You know, I picked it and I really did like it. I enjoyed it. I got about halfway through college and I thought, well, I can teach, you know, and that's kind of the area I was going. I wasn't really motivated about anything. I never really enjoyed school. You guys may have similar feelings. It was like a means to an end. You know, whatever I have to do to get my degree to get out because I want to be done kind of thing. Probably about halfway through my college education, my dad started telling me you need to go to law school. And I was like, no way. There's no way I'm doing that. That's more school. I couldn't get in, blah, blah, blah. I had every excuse in the book. But he kept really pushing me and really kind of giving me some direction. And so I finally decided to look into it. And it's kind of similar to what Kristen was talking about with the Army. With law school, luckily, you can have just about any major and go into it. So it was lucky for me because I hadn't planned before. And so I think this summer before my senior year, it was like, we'll try this. And I took the LSAT and it worked out and ended up getting in and kind of where I was going. But again, I still didn't have a whole lot of direction. And I used to work at the admissions office here at Tech. And so I would talk, I don't know, maybe I gave tours to some of y'all who came in, but I would give tours to incoming students. And a lot of the questions would be about, what do I major in? What major can I get a job in? Or those kind of things. And I just remember being kind of overwhelmed by that because there's no way, I think typically, as a high school graduate, you're going to come in and know what you want to do. And that stays the same no matter what, and it's, you love that job. Unless you're just really driven and you're very organized, you're more on top of it than I was, certainly, or you're not challenging yourself. You're not pushing yourself. And so I always told people, start in something you're interested in and see where that leads you, see where that takes you. But I say that, the flip side of that was I really didn't take any professional advice. I went to law school without ever shadowing a lawyer, ever working in a law firm. I didn't even know a single lawyer. So I had no idea what being a lawyer really was, which is not very smart. Don't do that. But I did. And so I got into law school and I got there and it was just like, oh, what did I get myself into? Where am I going to go from here? But you take it a day at a time, you got through it. And I quickly realized that if I was going to practice law, I really wanted to be a prosecutor. Because I really believe in what prosecutors do. I think there's a need for them, and I felt like this is something I can get behind. And so I'm sure all of y'all know, but we work for the state of Tennessee, and what we do is prosecute crimes. So it's great finding out what you want to do. Getting a job in what you want to do is a whole other story. And so by the time I graduated law school, it was 2010, and that was really when specifically the legal market was taking a turn for the worse. But I got out, and you study for the bar that summer, so you're not really a lawyer. You get done with your law degree, but first you got to pass the bar before you can practice. Went all the way through that, took the bar. You take the bar in July. You don't find out until you pass it until October. So there was this big long window, and so not only am I waiting on those results, but I've had no job offers, like zero. And at this point I'm getting desperate, like sending out resumes every day to any legal law office within a 500-mile radius. I just thought, oh my gosh, I'm not going to get a job, literally. I found out if I passed the bar October 8th, I'll never forget that day. A week before that, I was approached by our District Attorney General, Randy York, and he said, hey, I'm going to have this position coming open in like 2 weeks. Is it something you're interested in? So it just kind of fell into place, and it was really perfect. I mean, it's kind of divine intervention. But that's how I ended up where I am today. And the reason that he thought of me was kind of being in the right place at the right time. During that window that I was waiting for the bar results, I worked at a local organization called the Genesis House. I don't know if y'all are familiar with that. But they're an association that assists victims of domestic violence. So one of the things that they do is provide legal advocates for victims of domestic violence. And basically you go to court with a victim of domestic violence and you explain what's going on and make sure that they understand the process, make sure their voice is being heard, whether it's to a district attorney or to a judge, whatever the case may be. And it's not a job, it was a job I was probably way overqualified for. And typically, you don't even need a college education to do it. So when I put in my resume, it's kind of like, what's wrong with this person? Why is she applying for this job? But it worked out really well. It was something I was interested in. Again, you kind of have to take a leap of faith. I did it. I did it for those 3 months. And the reason that the district attorney attorney approached me was because he was in court when he found out his domestic violence prosecutor was going to be moving to another position. And so he's kind of looking around, well, here's this girl, he's waiting to hear back from the bar, and lo and behold, she's a domestic violence, advocate, or whatever the case may be. So it worked out perfectly. And I passed the bar, and I started, that was October 8th, I started November 1st. And so I've been working here in Pickville, that was 2010. I've been working here for quite a while. And I'm a domestic violence prosecutor. I prosecute crimes of domestic violence in Putnam, DeKalb, and White County. And I love what I do, I really do. It's a great job, and it's a great opportunity, and it's amazing how those things fall into place. But when Mr. Shaver asked me to come tonight, I was kind of thinking like, I don't know what I can tell you besides you have to be willing to challenge yourself, and you've got to be willing to kind of listen to your intuition. I think there's nobody who's going to tell you better about what you need to do with your life, but you got to be willing to listen to that, even when it's tough choices, and they're choices that maybe aren't comfortable. They're not choices oftentimes that are easy, but those are the ones that I think lead to the most rewarding, platform. And of course, I've only been working professionally for, not even 2 years yet, so I'm still a baby, a baby prosecutor, as they say. So I don't have a whole lot of pearls of wisdom, but as a recent graduate, I know that I am where I am in the position that I'm in today because I was willing to take challenges and, push myself a little bit. So I really would encourage you guys to do that. And ask for help. That was a huge thing about being at Tech. Like I said, I worked at the admissions office. I kind of did, I think I did it for a scholarship. I don't know if any of you, well, y'all don't have to do that. But we had to work in a office to, that was my contribution to the university was be a clerk. But anyway, so that's how I did that during Tech. And, that led to some really great relationships. And you guys are in such an ideal position because you are so active here. And you have the opportunity to meet so many people, to get to know so many people who can be so key in opening up doors to you down the road. When I applied for law school, it was a long shot. Statistically, it was a big long shot. I could look at what their average class was. And I believe to this day, the reason I got in was because my letters of reference. And it was because my advisor knew me personally. And it was because Dr. Hodem in the admissions office knew me personally. And so they could speak on my behalf, and their letters were genuine, and they were very kind and very gracious. And so that opened so many doors for me, and it's something that I would continue to encourage you to do. Talk to people, talk to your coaches, talk to your trainers, talk to whoever about what you're thinking about doing, where you want to go, what you're interested in. And I think that will help you along the way. Tech's it's such a great community, and it's got some really good resources. But that's all I have.
I like we had Catherine come down. We're going to bring down a volunteer, and Natalie's going to question you, cross-examine you in the witness stand. No, we were going to do that, but we decided not to. Question for each of you. You can either, or both of you, at any point in when the law school or your training, did you ever doubt what you were doing? Question, am I taking the wrong path? Should I turn in directions?
Yeah, absolutely. For me, it was really hard for me because I knew nothing about the military at all. I felt like I kind of knew this public relations stuff based on my degree, but I still didn't know anything about what the military was. I mean, it is so hard to learn all those acronyms. I'm not gonna lie to you, it's really tough. So yeah, I questioned it a lot, but also it was really hard. Something that you were kind of touching on with moving around so much for me. I mean, I spent the first 21 years of my life, I think, in Cookeville, Tennessee. And then the last 7 years, I think I've bounced around to about 6 or 7, 8. I lost count. The other day, I couldn't even remember where I lived. I gotta be honest. I was like, what state am I in? Kentucky, that's right. So, not saying that you have to move around a lot. For me, that's what I had to do. But yes, I'm telling you what, when I got that job offer for Heidelberg, Germany, I had not ever been to Europe before. Did a lot of traveling around as a kid around the U.S., but going along with what she was saying as well with networking, I had networked well enough throughout that internship program that someone over in Heidelberg knew me and wanted to hire me, and I thought, what in the heck am I doing? I tell you what, I was bawling my eyes out getting on that airplane, leaving my parents, flying out of Atlanta, Georgia. I will never forget that, taking the 2 dogs and a cat and just getting on that and just crying, thinking, oh my God, who have been bosses. And I just got my 5-year award like a couple months ago, so I haven't been in it that long either, but I have made sure to keep those connections so that anytime I do kind of second guess myself, which is all the time, I have somebody that I can call or email and say, hey, just remind me, am I doing this right? And there's nothing wrong with that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I think that's the best way to go. It just gives me a lot more confidence in what I'm doing. So.
And I definitely, just echoing that, I know my first day of law school, I was discussing this earlier, but I clearly remember that. It was kind of an auditorium like this, and so we were all sitting down, and like I said, I had no idea what law school was like. I just remember being so sick I couldn't eat breakfast that morning. And so I got to the law school, and we were sitting down, and I leaned over to talk to the girl next to me, she's like my age, and asked her, where'd you go to college? And she said, well, I just got my doctorate in some kind of rocket science at MIT. And, she had like 5 degrees, and she's like, where did you go to college? I was like, Tennessee Tech. It's in Cookeville, and it's just kind of like, I felt, for me, coming from Cookeville, Tech kind of got a bad rap as like a community college. If you can't go anywhere else, go to Tech kind of thing. And so it was really hard. I never believed that when I was at Tech, because I knew that I was challenged academically here, and I knew I was challenged as a person. But sitting in a room of MIT grads, people who on paper had accomplished a lot, it was very hard for those doubts and concerns not to come creeping in, and not to be a little bit embarrassed to say, I was the only Tennessee Tech graduate there, and we had a class of like 150. But I quickly learned, I think that is such an advantage, and it's one I would encourage you to use, either whatever it is you feel like maybe is a little bit of an insecurity, and kind of what we're here for today is kind of being a woman in a professional world. Sometimes that can be a vulnerable spot, can make you feel a little bit vulnerable. I think you can use that to your advantage, though. The best thing in the world is being underestimated, because you fly under the radar. And so it's a great position to be in. It really is, because you have a lot of room to grow, to succeed, but it's also, you've got the power play, because you know what you're capable of doing, and you get the opportunity to prove it to everybody else. And so that was something I really struggled with in law school, but you learn to overcome. And just as Krista was saying, now when I started my job, I started on a Monday. I had to be in court Wednesday, and I think I had like 27 cases on the docket. I'd never been a lawyer before. I'd never been in court before. It was just like, here's your cases. Good luck. Because nobody wants to do what I do. So everybody was really quick to just dump them off on me. So I had to go to court, and these attorneys were coming up, because, it's our case. It's the state of Tennessee versus so-and-so. So whatever attorney was representing the defendant would come up and say, okay, well, what do you want to do on this case? And so I was kind of like, what do you want to do on this case? You kind of had to bluff your way through it for a while. But yeah, I had so many doubts, and still do. That's something that you, if you're not doubting yourself, you're probably not pushing yourself. You're probably a little bit too comfortable. So it's something that you continue to struggle with, but don't let that be, that feeling of being vulnerable or feeling disadvantaged sometimes, don't let that rule you. Take control of it and use it to your advantage, because it's, like I said, it can be a really great asset. It's the best feeling in the world is when you walk into a room and nobody notices you, and then, man, all of a sudden you're controlling the room. And that's something that you had the opportunity to do. Being a woman in the workplace, you have a little bit more opportunity to do that. Sometimes you get looked over, or sometimes there's preconceived notions about what you're going to do or how you're going to act or things like that. So that's a big strength. Don't let it overtake you.
We're going to see if anybody wants to ask any questions, but I've also got some other questions. Both of these young ladies work in a very male-dominated field. The Army, obviously, male-dominated. Law, most of the lawyers you've ever heard of are men. Do either of you have any role models in your positions now? And then, do you have any females who have been inspirational to you?
This was one of my interview questions with when I got into the internship, and at that point I thought I should say someone from the media. So I said, Ann Curry or Katie Couric or somebody like that. But now being in public affairs, I realize they're the enemy. No, I'm just kidding. I've been very fortunate to work with some very high-speed, extremely talented female commanders fact, my commander in Heidelberg was a woman, Colonel Paula Underwood. She was a doctor. She was a family practice doctor most of the time, but she was also our commander, and she was amazing. And it's a different atmosphere, because now I do work for a male commander, and I mean, it's kind of hard to describe really, but I think that it brought a little bit of a different atmosphere. Heidelberg was like this happy little family, and Colonel Underwood was kind of like the mom figure, and we were all like her little ducklings following along, whatever. But now with Colonel Marr, my current commander, it's a bigger place, and it feels a little different. But I would say I really enjoyed working with Colonel Underwood, and just there's a lot of female generals out there, but it's really hard. If you don't know a lot about the military, I don't want to start throwing out like generals' names and stuff at you, because you don't really know the level of what they've done. But they're really starting to come around a lot more, and I do get some flack, and I get a lot of respect too. It just depends on who you're working with. I am fortunate that people do look at me as a professional most of the time, because I really try to carry myself as a professional. I mean, I wear clothes like this all the time, and I'm doing briefings, and I'm up in front of the soldiers all the time, just trying to carry myself in a professional way. But I do feel like sometimes you have to prove yourself a little bit more. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but it makes me feel really good when people come up to me afterwards and say, "That was really surprising that you pulled that off. But we really enjoyed your briefing," or whatever, things like that. So.
Yeah, and I have to say, are any of y'all from Jackson County? Close by? No, Jackson County. Okay. Well, one of my role models, even before I started practicing law, when I worked as an advocate, I had time to kind of sit in court, which was really helpful for me, because I sat and watched, a lot of things that were going on. And I was just amazed and really disappointed by, I have to, kind of tell in my own profession, just the personalities that my profession attracts. And watching those interactions, watching people's personal choices on how they choose to treat people, whether it was clients or other attorneys or whatever the case may be, you kind of just get like a grimy feeling. Sometimes it's working with like used car salesmen all day. It's just kind of like, ugh, you just can't trust them. And I remember being in Jackson County, the judge there is Tiffany Gibson, and she, not a whole lot older than me. She was General Sessions judge there, and kind of an impressive character. But I watched her every single day in court, and I don't know if you guys have ever been to General Sessions court, but it is like a circus, literally. You have no idea the people who walk in those doors, and the stuff that you hear is amazing. But no matter how much her patience was tried, no matter how disrespectful people might have been to her, no matter whether or not they respected her authority, she was polite and kind and considerate to every single person she dealt with. And I just thought, first of all, that's neat. I mean, I think that that's a good way to be. I think, that pays back in a lot of different ways. But I thought it's tough. It's really tough to be that way in our profession. And I'm sure there's other professions that are that way. The legal profession is not alone in being, kind of aggressive and really contentious. And so it's hard for her to go against the grain every single day, not lose her patience, not get into these power play with people. I just thought it was really impressive, and that's something I'd really strive to be. And I think, especially as a woman, it's hard to sometimes, kind of what Christian is saying, like assert your authority. Women, unfortunately, you're either a pushover or you're the word that we all know, and that's kind of like, there's no in between. There's no like, well, no, she was just really assertive. It's like, she was awful to deal with, and so it's kind of hard to walk that fine line of, this is my ground and I'm going to stand here, but I'm not changing my personality, because I'm not that way normally. I'm not going to change who I am, and I'm not going to let the system change who I am because of the other people that I deal with. Also, my boss, our district attorney in New York, he recently became a district attorney, but he worked as a private attorney in Crossville for most of his career, and has a very good reputation, but very tough reputation as a civil attorney and a defense attorney. So it was kind of weird for him to come in on the prosecution side, and I had never really worked with him personally. I knew him personally, and he was always super nice, but it's amazing how sometimes personalities change when you walk into the courtroom. But we picked up a murder case recently, and so he called me in to work on it, and so I was working with him. So our first time we were in court, I was so relieved and refreshed to see his demeanor in court, because he is the same way, respectful, kind, and considerate, 100% of the time. Doesn't mean he's not tough. Doesn't mean he doesn't get his way a lot of times. But I thought thought that's so great to have that in a leader and in a boss, especially to learn from. But those are probably two people that I look to and I think, kind of like, what would they do? You get in tough spots, and it's good to have people that you can look at and say, this is the kind of person I would want other people to see me as being. This is kind of the appearance I want to have.
I want to open it. Anybody in the audience have any questions that you'd like to pose to these young ladies? Anything at all?
Yeah.
You said that you're married, and I was wondering how you balance that. Because I know some of us are going to get married pretty soon. So how do you balance your career? Because I know some of us are in pretty dominant professions.
And it is absolutely tough. A lot of days coming home crying. I have a husband who's very patient and very kind. He's a good listener, which is good. It's very important to have. But I think you kind of have to work. And for me, it's difficult because I always had these ideas of what it's going to be like to be married, first of all, what it's going to be like to be a professional woman. You kind of have these idealistic views. And so the real world is often different. And so it's hard to balance that. And it's hard sometimes to adjust your role and still feel like you're doing a good job at work and doing a good job at home and all those kind of things. Probably the biggest thing that I struggle with is my cases are extremely emotionally draining, and that's why nobody wants to do my types of cases, because it's basically all day long of very sad stories. And so it's hard for me to come home and not be emotionally drained, and that's something I kind of struggle with. I guess my advice would be work it out. You have to have a partner who you feel comfortable enough saying, I can't make small talk tonight, or this is how I feel, or what's going on. And you're both going to learn from each other, and you're both going to learn how to work through it. Everybody's going to have their own way to work through it. A lot of times, my husband and I take walks, and we don't even talk sometimes while we're walking, but for me, that's a physical release, so to speak. It's something to do. It gives me time to unwind, and it works for us. And we kind of just fell into that, and it worked really well. And it's going to be unique for everybody. It's going to be different. You just kind of have to, especially if you're just getting married, because I'm fairly a newlywed. It'll be 3 years in November. There's going to be a lot of things that you got to learn how to do with, learn how to communicate, learn how to fight, learn how to, get along, all those kind of things. So it's kind of part of it. Absolutely doable though. You don't have to sacrifice one for the other. And so that's the big thing to keep in mind. Yeah. Would you want
No.
Do your cases ever freak you out?
Yeah, there's
I wanted to be a lawyer, but I would be scared.
Well, my boss is getting me a stun gun. He did tell me today that he was going to buy me a stun gun, so I guess he lived kind of a different life. It definitely opens your eyes to some situations that you probably wouldn't want to know before. I think probably the toughest thing for me, because I handle domestic assaults, 90% of my victims don't want to prosecute when they get to court. So we have hearing the details of crimes that have happened, or sometimes like what a woman's gone through, or whatever the case may be. She doesn't want to go forward with it, and I'm stuck. So I don't, as a prosecutor, I can only prosecute things I have evidence to prosecute. So I can't prosecute it, but I know, we all know what's going on there. And so those are the things that I really struggle with, is when I feel helpless, when I feel like I'm not helping people. That's pretty difficult. We had a rape case recently where the lady testified, and she did an excellent job, testified at the preliminary hearing. It was the first case that I've handled that was really kind of the more sexual assault side of it, and she did an excellent job, and was just crying, and was, testifying about the details of the case. And so after it was over, I said, I'm so sorry that you had to go through that. Is there anything I can help you with? And she said, I just love him so much. I just don't want him to think that I want to go forward with this prosecution. And I was just at a loss. It's just like she had just testified about all these things that she'd experienced because of this man. She told the truth, but she was still in love with this man. And so those are the things that I have a hard time with. I have a hard time leaving that at the office and coming home and, hey, what's for dinner? It's hard to do that. And it's hard to let that stuff go. You probably had cases or situations that are stressful with.
Yeah, not like that though. Yeah. No, you're good. I can't think of anything to top that one, so I won't even try.
Any other questions? Yeah.
There's one piece of advice that you can give our student
not be afraid of that. It's so important, even in my job every day, to just continue to make sure I'm Kristen. You know, I never wanted to lose myself through everything that I went through with working and meeting people and traveling and on the job and everything. So you guys are so talented and so impressive already with what you do. Like Natalie said earlier, I mean, the fact that you guys are student athletes and balancing this athlete stuff, and I didn't do anything through college except, you know, go to class and try to graduate quickly. So I am in awe of what you all have accomplished so far. Just carry that with you. I mean, don't ever be afraid of just, you know, standing up and remembering who you are and where you came from and everything you've already accomplished. Believe me, it's so much more impressive than so many people realize, and just definitely remember that.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. Chris and I were talking about that. I think you guys have already had so much experience with, you know, you guys are asking me about balancing home life and stuff. There's no way I could have done what y'all did. And so I think that you guys already have a pretty firm grip on balancing your needs versus demands that other people may have for you, your career goals, maybe goals that you had, you know, this is what I want to achieve by the time I graduate college or whatever the case may be. You guys are way ahead of the game. But the big thing is, don't underestimate yourself. Even if the world is, don't underestimate yourself. And I would use, whenever you feel disadvantaged, use that to your advantage. Don't allow that to dictate who you are or what you're going to achieve. Use that to your advantage, and you can always rise above it. I mean, there's always ways to achieve your goals, but you guys are on a good path anyway.
Any other questions? Well, as you know, as student athletes, you all have your parents coming to watch you play and perform all the time. And I just want you to know that no matter how old you get, it doesn't ever end. Parents are always proud of their kids, and they'll always be following you wherever you go. Because in fact, both of our young ladies today have their parents here today, so I just want to introduce them very quickly. Natalie's parents, Natalie Winningham Ivy, her parents are in the back, Jim and Donna Winningham, and I want to welcome them. And her husband, James, is back there.
That's why I was bragging on him, because he was sitting watching.
So I want to welcome them here. And Kristen's parents are here as well. Her mom is in the back, Joan back there, and her dad is, well, that's right, that's me. I'm very proud of my daughter, Kristen Shaver Marquez. Didn't want you to know that before we got started. I'd like to wrap things up. Thank you for coming to the Dr. Diane Murphy Leaders for Life. Both of Kristen and Natalie said that if you have any individual questions that you'd like to talk to face-to-face, they'll stick around. But for right now, if you would all join me in saying thank you to them for coming and spending time with us.